Today we're not building it, I'm building it. I built the ROBIE house. I built the ROBIE house by Lloyd Wright. Ugh, not a good entry. We'll replace it with something else. Hey, welcome back to my channel. I built the ROBIE house by Lloyd Wright. This is a very famous house in Illinois. It's one sort of exemplary of the prairie style, which was pretty exclusive to the United States in the early 1900s. This one was built 1908 to 1909, and it's had like a pretty dramatic history. I was kind of surprised. But one of the reasons that I really wanted to build this in The Sims is Lloyd Wright is one of my favorite architects, and I actually fell in love with this book when I was a kid because it is not the book. So the book Chasing Vermeer by, I think it's Blue Ballet, is a kid's book that talks about Lloyd Wright, and there's this whole mystery involved, and it kind of dives into some other art pieces. But it features a house that is, from my memory, the ROBIE house. It's either the ROBIE house or it's a house inspired by the ROBIE house. I don't know if it's supposed to be the exact same house or not. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I've read it. But I really loved that book as a kid. I actually borrowed a copy from the library, and my dog, who was a puppy at the time, she was probably only about 6 months old, chewed it to shreds, and I remember vividly like sobbing to my mom about the book being destroyed and walking into my school library sobbing, holding this chewed up book in front of my librarian, who I respected and loved so much. I'm a huge book lover. It was probably like the most embarrassing thing that I could have experienced. Anyway, yeah, this house is featured in that book, and so I learned about this house pretty early on, and then even when I was studying interior design in college, I would kind of refer back to this house every once in a while. And I realized recently, like, I've never built it in The Sims, and I was just really surprised by that because I tend to try to build real things into The Sims. I think it's a fun challenge to try to adjust the floor plan and the proportions. And this house definitely had some proportions that had to be messed around with. And so pretty much I'm not entirely sure how much of this video at the beginning is me trying to figure out the floors, but it's a good chunk. And I ended up with probably 5 hours of footage, and this has all been cut down. There's not much footage of me doing the interior because OBS stopped recording and didn't tell me. So there would have been roughly 5 hours. I was left with like 3.5, and most of that is figuring out the floor plan. But I've cut that down for you guys. The problem is this house uses foundations and also like split level flooring, and it's just really hard to get that to come across in The Sims and have it still be functional and have it still look like what you want. So I played a little bit with foundations. I played a little bit with the terrain editing. Overall, I just think it looks better as 3 full height floors, as long as they're on the shortest wall height. So the thing about prairie style, there's a lot of emphasis on the horizontality of the building, which is different because for a very long time throughout architectural history, the emphasis is on verticality, making it tall, making it appear taller than maybe it is, because it's really hard to make a building tall and structurally sound. It's fairly easier to make it wide and spread out. So this house was different than the other houses at the time because it really emphasized those horizontal lines and really stretching out the space. And so that's what I kept in mind as I made edits and sort of fixed the floor plan to fit to what I needed, is I felt like as long as I was emphasizing those horizontal lines, it would have the same integrity as the original building. Lloyd Wright was a pretty cool dude, in my opinion. I haven't looked too much into his personal history, so I'm sure that there are skeletons in his closet, but at least with his designing, I really love his buildings and just sort of his work ethic. He designed a lot of his own interiors, which is not very common. At least from what I've learned of architecture, they tend to be separate, and I think it makes it seem so much more cohesive because he designed what the exterior looks like, he designed what the interior looks like, and he had custom made furniture for what he was building, and this house was no different. So this was originally supposed to be for a single family home, but I've built it here in The Sims as a library. And in real life, it's a museum. And so I felt like either a library or museum was sort of paying tribute to what the building's used as. It's really big to be a single family home, and it doesn't have much yard space. And in real life, it has like a 3-car garage, and it felt like such a huge waste of space. And then because I had to make adjustments to the floor plan where the kitchen is supposed to be, there's just not very much room, and it's also supposed to be, so I think that this works better in The Sims as a library, and I like that it allows there to be a little bit more room and space, because that's what the real building is like. It's big enough that it can have this big open floor plan, and in The Sims, because I had to make some adjustments and because the proportions are different, if I had filled it with furniture, it just wouldn't have felt right, I don't think. I'm really, really proud of how this turned out. I was really excited. Here, I'm beginning to fuss around with windows and doors, and it was so difficult deciding what to do with the windows and doors. The original building has these beautiful stained glass windows that he designed. Frank Lloyd Wright was really obsessed with 30 and 60-degree angles, and you see that a lot in his design work in the furniture and in the building spaces. And he designed these gorgeous stained glass windows, and we just don't have anything like it. The stained glass windows that came with Realm of Magic, they're way too organic for what the style is. It's a pretty geometric, rigid, vertical, horizontal, angular design, and it didn't seem worth it to just put any stained glass windows. Like, I felt like it had to be closer. So I ended up picking some from University that they're not too big, so it doesn't detract from the horizontality. And it kind of works out. I did have a really hard time with the roofs because there are these beautiful patios and balconies upstairs, but the roof cuts in, and so I spent a long time on the roof. But I tried to cover up with bushes and counters, and hopefully you don't notice and it doesn't bother you. I sort of pictured this as a library / community space. So on the toppest room, on the highest level room is more of like a rec center type vibe. There's the ping pong table, there's a bar with counters, there's like a communal kitchen space. Because I figured that this was the place in the neighborhood where the teens showed up. I've got a basketball court, there's like a miniature makeshift art studio. I didn't want to clutter this up too much. I wanted this to work on as many computers as possible. I say that, but I did not limit myself on packs, and I don't right now know how many packs it is, but I'll list it in the description what packs this uses. But I didn't want it to be overly cluttered. I have a really hard time playing in overly cluttered community lots. The community lots are already so glitchy, it just makes it harder to navigate and deal with. There is sort of what I picture as like the main library space. There's desks where I assume people would pull out their laptops or students would work on homework. There's some couches, some bookshelves, there's a couple chessboards. So this is like the quiet floor, and then the bottom floor is where all of the bookshelves are, and the computer desks, and like a kid's room. For the style, because we don't have Frank Lloyd Wright, we don't have a Frank Lloyd stuff pack. Would love one, EA, if you're listening. We didn't. I kept it simple. I'll just say that. I went with things that had like a really natural color palette, because that's what his spaces are. They were pretty neutral. They were pretty warm toned with the woods and the lighting. I felt like the mission style furniture and lamps worked really well because they look kind of similar to what his furniture looked like. But I'm really happy with this. There's a bunch of outdoor chairs and tables, which I thought was really cute. There's a couple different courtyards that have space for you to, I don't know, do courtyard things. Maybe there will be what are the people, and they dress like the astronaut the statue, the living statues, that's what I'm thinking of. And then I also, just for like set dressing purposes, there's a room that looks like it's probably more administrative. It's probably where the people who are in charge of this place take care of, and there's like a utility closet, just to make it look, I don't know, more like a real place. But I definitely change up the floor plan from the original. But first I built the whole thing. I built the whole thing and then I adjusted where I needed. It's supposed to be a pretty open floor plan in real life, and that didn't come across in The Sims. It felt really closed off. So I felt like opening it up was probably the better choice to make. It is truer to the integrity of the build itself. Pretty basic gardening too. Just stuff that looks commercial. Basic trees, basic flower bushes. I didn't realize until after I made this and was doing some research that I could talk about the building and the architect. They actually remodeled the house starting in 2002, and they've just completed it, like in 2019. They just completed the major renovations to the building. And the building itself has gone through so many different functionalities and so many moments where it might have gotten torn down. Something I'm really passionate about with archaeology and architecture is the idea of building reuse. It's actually statistically better for the environment to remodel and reuse an existing building than it is to tear one down and build a new one. But generally it's cheaper for the developer to tear it down and build a new one, because they don't have to go in and fix the outdated materials that maybe are against code, policies, etc., etc. But I think it's better to remodel a building. I think it's worth that extra effort. You get to maintain a piece of history, and then you also are being kinder to the environment. It was almost demolished in 1941, so only 30 years after it was built, it was almost torn down. And then again in 1957, it was almost torn down. And Frank Lloyd Wright actually showed up with protesters and the press in 1957. And it was part of that movement that convinced the school who owned it to keep it and to not tear it down. And an agreement was made with nearby fraternities who gave up their homes that they lived in, because the school wanted to tear the ROBIE house down to make room for dorms and student housing. So the fraternities gave up their house, gave up their property so that their houses could get torn down and school housing could be built and save this historical architectural monument, which I thought was really cool. You don't often hear stories about fraternities making great community decisions. And I thought it was cool that he showed up at his own house and sort of helped campaign for its survival. The house was built with a steel structure, which is what allows it to have such long overhanging roofs without support, and that's also what allowed the open floor plan to work the way it did without internal columns or supporting walls. Steel was, I think it was developed in like the late 1800s, and it was still kind of controversial in the architectural world because it was so new and industrial. And I feel like when you look at this house, you don't think industrial at all. I mean, it's brick and it's got like a lot of modern elements, but you don't look at this house and think that it's made of steel. It looks earthy. The interior is very warm, neutral. All his lighting was very warm. To emphasize the horizontality of the building itself, one thing I really think is cool about this building is it just shows how important those little details are. So in the actual building, between each piece of brick, you have a horizontal strip of mortar and you have vertical strips of mortar. And when they built this house, the horizontal strips of mortar were kept a cream color so that they would stand out against the red brick. And the vertical pieces were colored to look similar to the brick, so that from a distance it just looks like long strips of brick colored. And then they also used Roman bricks, which are the long thin ones. And I probably could have tried, we do have long horizontal bricks. I didn't look at those, to be honest, but this one was the closest color, so I went with this one. And I wouldn't personally match the tile roof with a brick. For me, that's a bit too much red, but that's what's on the real build. So I stayed true. I stayed true to the character, and I think they're different enough in color that there's and texture, that it's not too much. But I also tried to emphasize the bricks and the horizontality with that white wall strip, which is not on the original building, but I felt like it really pushed the theme and idea that we were going with, this horizontal. It's argued in one of the many architecture books I have. This one is Clues to American Architecture. I'll put the information in the description box if you're interested in architecture books. I like this one. Kind of belongs to a library, but it's fine. It's with me now. But it claims that the ranch style houses that became very popular in America, the horizontal, long, stretched out house is pretty much inspired by this house and Frank Lloyd Wright and the buildings that he made. Wright loved the low, horizontal feel of the prairie, calling it a great simplicity that made the trees, the flowers, and the sky thrilling by contrast. In Wright's words, the vertical thrust gives a sense of power, but the horizontal brings us serenity and peace. A building should appear to grow easily from its site and be shaped to harmonize with its surroundings. Wright urged an architecture of simplicity and integrity that combined comfort, utility, and beauty, but did not imitate past styles. The 1800s and 1900s are so fascinating in architectural history because there was so much emphasis for so long on using classic and Roman architectural styles, and it really wasn't until the industrial era that people really started to break free of that and be rebels. They developed some incredible technologies that allowed a totally new way to look at buildings, and it's been really interesting to learn about that part of history. I'm not gonna lie, I love classical styles. It's beautiful, it's classic for a reason. It's so pleasing to look at, but it's kind of all the same over and over and over. And it's so fascinating to me to learn about people who thought totally outside the box and made this not totally on their own, because they were definitely inspired and bounced off of each other's ideas. But I just think it's so fascinating. I find architecture so interesting. It's an art that's so long-lasting, and I don't even know what I was going to say, but we could very easily not think about the buildings that we occupy, but we don't. And especially as Sims builders, we definitely think about buildings and spaces, and I feel like it's definitely important to us what it looks like and feels like, and I think that it deserves that much attention, especially now that I've been at home for, I think it's 3 months now, 3.5 months, never leaving this space. It's probably the only time I've ever been bothered about living in an apartment, because I would so love to just paint one of these walls, or to add texture, or to just put a bunch of holes in my walls and not have to worry about filling them up. Like I've never minded living in apartments. I've pretty much lived in apartments for most of my life, or rented houses, but being stuck in the same house for 3 months definitely makes you hyper aware of your surroundings. That, and I've been playing a lot of Animal Crossing, and like many others, it's making me want to redecorate my entire house. My mom has started playing Animal Crossing. She plays it with my sister who lives with her and me. We just had an Animal Crossing play date, actually. And she's experiencing the same thing too. She wants to redecorate and reorganize her whole house. I think it's funny. When you think about spaces too long, it suddenly becomes everything you think about. There's this really interesting Netflix documentary series that each episode focused on a different type of artist. And one of the episodes was about an interior designer who actually designed some of the cafeterias for IKEA, which I thought was really cool. Her philosophy on interior design pretty much lined up with everything I was feeling but couldn't put to words. She put a lot of emphasis and work into the physical feeling of objects in a space. And they have this shot of her testing out different chairs, and you see her sitting in the chair, feeling the armrests, sort of wiggling around, and she does it with every chair. And you can see her really thinking about, like, what is it like to experience this? What is it like to sit in this chair? What am I feeling? What is my instinct when I sit in this chair? And she just puts a lot of research into the psychology of a space, basically, and what it makes you feel, what it makes you want. And I just think that's so incredible. It's definitely like a privileged thing to even do that for a space. Not many people have that much time or resources or energy to put that much research into how to develop a space. And so it was really great to see someone who does have the ability to do that and learn from them. And I just think that's so cool. I wish that more emphasis was done with that, because there's a lot of commercial spaces where it doesn't feel like you're meant to stay. The best example I can think of is like really fancy hotels, or even like medium fancy hotels, where it's not that expensive to stay there. And you'll see their big lobby spaces. And the reason hotels make those big lobby spaces is for you to come hang out. It's for you to have somewhere to go that's outside of your room. So if you're staying for a long time, you'll come sit in these chairs, or you'll visit their bar in their restaurant and you'll order a few cocktails. They want you to stay. They want you to spend money. They want your hotel experience to be comfortable. But how often are those chairs actually that comfortable? They are not that comfortable. They're usually with a really stiff commercial fabric that's easy to clean with a long wear life. But it's not, like, you don't want to stay there. It doesn't, they need to hire her. She did actually. She was commissioned to do a hotel, and you see scenes of that too. But I think about that episode a lot, especially when I'm designing in The Sims, which I know is silly because, again, they're Sims. They're not psychologically affected by how you make the space, but I just think it makes spaces look more interesting, and I think as a player, it impacts you. It impacts how you interact with the space. So anyway, it's something that I think about, the psychology of a space. This is up on the gallery if you would like to download it. It's called the ROBIE house, but only one B. My instinct would be to put two, but it's just one B. Or you can look up the hashtag Sberry, and I should probably do SberryGames. You can look up the hashtag SberryGames, and you will find this build, and probably no other builds, because I've just decided right now that I'm going to start using a hashtag. I hope you like it. I'm sorry I didn't get the footage of all the interior. I've had a couple issues with OBS recently, but I've made sure to include screenshots so you can see what it looks like, and I have a top view plan of all 3 floors. I worked really hard on this. I hope you can tell. I hope that you like it, and if you build the ROBIE house, let me know, because I couldn't find very many on YouTube. But I would like to see how you build it, so at least send me screenshots or the download link, or the video if you make a video. But you should definitely make a video, because there's literally only like 3 other ROBIE house speed builds on YouTube. I intentionally didn't look until after I built mine, and I was so surprised at how few they are, because this is a very famous house. I thought I would answer some Sims related questions. In case you're not interested in Frank Lloyd Wright, let me talk about myself. Great, okay. First question. What is the first Sims game you ever played? The first Sims game I ever played was some version of The Sims 2. It was at a friend's house. I don't know if she had expansion packs. And I thought it was so cool, and I wanted it so bad. I was so jealous, and it took several months of talking my mom into buying the game for me. But then at a visit to Half Price Books that I actually used to work for, but that's a different story, they were selling a used copy of Sims 1 Double Deluxe, or Deluxe Edition. I don't remember which one it was called. Who is your favorite pre-made Sims family? I really loved the Burbs in Sims 2. I always had them move into the house that looked like a church, and I thought Lucy was the cutest. But I usually make my own people. My favorite Sim that I've made myself was probably Amelia Whitley, and I've actually stopped playing with her house because she's an elder now. She lives with her daughter, her son-in-law, and they're her grandchild, and her dog is a ghost, and I'm just so scared that she's gonna die, and I'll be so sad. I want to say thank you to everyone who subscribed and watched my videos. Pretty much as soon as I started playing The Sims, I wanted to share what I was building, what I was making, but my friends didn't really play, and now I'm turning 25 soon, and I didn't think that I would still be playing. But I have a partner who doesn't judge me and supports me and encourages me, and my friends still don't really care. But I've found this great community of like-minded players who also really love this game and love creating, and I'm just so grateful to have found you guys. I'll talk about this a different time, but I've tried and started to make a YouTube channel so many times, pretty much since I was 14, 15, and I can't believe I'm finally doing it. And I'm just really grateful that you guys are hanging out with me as I figure this out. I post videos most Thursdays and Sundays, usually, but if you're interested, follow me on Twitter, and then you'll be up to date on if you're getting a video from me or not. I do have summer break coming up. I only get 3 weeks before I go to summer quarter, but it's totally possible that I will post some spare extra videos because I will have free time for once. What a concept. Follow me and hit subscribe, please. Bye.